The words a man chooses are never random. They are a direct window into his mindset and intentions. When he texts you, pay attention to the nuances of what he says, because it's often louder than his actions. If he's dismissive, overly vague, or constantly avoiding emotional honesty, that's not just a bad day, it's a pattern. Every phrase he sends carries an unspoken message about how he sees you and your value. Women often underestimate the power of words because they hope actions will compensate. But words set the tone for everything that follows in a relationship. Ignoring them is like ignoring traffic signals on a busy road. If you keep pushing through red lights, you will eventually crash. The first step to empowerment is noticing the signs early. Respect yourself enough to take them seriously. Certain words can indicate avoidance or lack of commitment, even if they seem harmless at first glance. For example, phrases that suggest he's too busy or not ready may sound innocent, but they reveal priorities that don't include you. It's easy to convince yourself that timing is everything or that circumstances will change. Yet, patterns don't change unless someone consciously chooses to change. If his language constantly minimizes your importance, it's a warning, not an anomaly. Trust is built on consistent respect, not occasional apologies. The problem isn't that he's human, it's that his words are showing you who he is right now. Accepting half-hearted communication is a trap disguised as patience. When you acknowledge the truth in his words, you start reclaiming control of your emotional life. This is how you separate hope from reality. Words also convey respect, or the lack of it, in subtle ways that many women overlook. Comments that are sarcastic, demeaning, or dismissive are more than casual jokes. They are micro indicators of how he values you and your feelings. If he belittles your thoughts, opinions, or emotions, pay attention. Respect is non-negotiable, and ignoring disrespect teaches him it's acceptable. Women often bend over backward to justify rudeness or defensiveness, believing that love can excuse everything. But consistent disrespect is not an accident. It's a reflection of his character. Recognizing these signals protects you from prolonged disappointment. Emotional intelligence in communication is as important as emotional connection. Words are the first line of insight into someone's heart. Sometimes, women interpret words through the lens of desire rather than reality. They hear phrases like "I need space" or "I don't know what I want," and frame them as challenges to overcome. But these are not puzzles to solve. They are statements of fact. A man's language tells you what he prioritizes and who he chooses to be. Trying to decode it or convince yourself otherwise delays your growth. When a man repeatedly uses words that create doubt or diminish your worth, he is teaching you your role in his life. The choice is simple: either accept it and face frustration, or recognize it and redirect your energy. Clarity comes from listening to words, not wishing they were different. Words are a reflection of the heart, and ignoring them is like ignoring a compass pointing north. Every message carries emotional weight, and women who respect themselves pay attention to the signals embedded in casual texts. If he consistently chooses phrases that dismiss, manipulate, or minimize, he is revealing a lack of emotional availability. These moments are opportunities to decide what you will tolerate and what you won't. It's tempting to think actions are the only measure of intent, but words often arrive first and set expectations. When you honor the truth in what is communicated, you gain a rare form of empowerment. You start to understand that the way someone talks to you is a mirror of their commitment. The earlier you notice patterns, the sooner you protect your heart. Paying attention to words is not paranoia, it's intelligence and self-respect. Women have a tendency to rationalize behavior that should never be rationalized, especially when it comes to men they care about. When a man texts something dismissive or hurtful, the immediate response is often, maybe he didn't mean it, or he's just stressed. These excuses feel comforting because they allow hope to persist, but hope without evidence is dangerous. Rationalizing creates a mental loop that keeps you invested in someone who may never value you properly. You begin to see patterns as exceptions and mistakes as temporary. The truth is, consistency is the measure of character, not charm. When you make excuses for repeated behavior, you compromise your self-respect. Every rationalization delays clarity and prolongs unnecessary frustration. Recognizing this is the first step toward emotional empowerment. It's not about being harsh, it's about being honest with yourself. It's common to convince yourself that a man will change because you see potential, or because the person he is now isn't the person he could be. While growth is possible, it only occurs when someone chooses it. You cannot manufacture someone's willingness to communicate with care or respect. Waiting for him to evolve while ignoring harmful patterns is a form of self-deception. Women often invest emotionally in the idea of change rather than the reality of the person in front of them. This hope can make you interpret vague or dismissive texts as a temporary phase rather than a reflection of his true priorities. Emotional investment should be reciprocal. It cannot be one-sided. Recognizing when someone is unwilling to step up allows you to reclaim time and energy. Excuses can be comforting, but they cost your confidence and your peace. Rationalizing also comes from fear of confrontation, fear of being alone, and fear of losing the relationship. These fears are natural, but they should not dictate decisions about respect and boundaries. When you ignore what someone's words are saying because of fear, you reinforce their behavior. Men learn quickly what they can get away with, and if dismissive communication is tolerated, it becomes normalized. Understanding that fear is influencing your choices gives you clarity. You can act from a place of self-worth rather than desperation. When a man repeatedly texts phrases that diminish you, rationalization only delays the inevitable realization that he isn't aligned with your values. Courage comes from acknowledging reality without excuses. The more you do this, the more empowered you become. The danger of rationalizing lies in its subtlety. Small dismissive phrases seem insignificant until they accumulate into a pattern that erodes confidence. Sorry, I was busy, or I didn't mean it like that, becomes part of a larger narrative where your needs are consistently minimized. Rationalization turns these moments into anomalies rather than patterns to be acknowledged. Women who trust themselves learn to recognize the difference between a single mistake and a recurring tendency. Emotional intelligence means observing trends in communication, not hoping for perfection. When you stop making excuses for behavior that undermines you, you take control of the relationship dynamic. Patterns never lie, even when intentions are murky. Consistent words reveal priorities, and your interpretation of them must be grounded in reality. Excuses should never replace clarity. Rationalization can feel like patience, but it's really tolerance of mistreatment disguised as hope. It convinces you that staying invested is noble, when in reality it keeps you tethered to disappointment. Understanding this distinction allows you to act deliberately rather than reactively. A man who sends harmful or dismissive messages repeatedly is showing his true colors. Excuses don't change his behavior, they only prolong the impact on your heart. Emotional maturity is recognizing that no explanation justifies repeated disregard. When you stop rationalizing and start observing, your decisions become aligned with self-respect. The moment you see patterns for what they are, you gain clarity and freedom. Rationalization is seductive because it delays discomfort, but discomfort is a small price for truth. Your worth is proven through your response to reality, not your tolerance of excuses. Boundaries are often misunderstood, but they are not a tool of control, they are a declaration of self-respect. When a man sends messages that cross emotional lines, whether dismissive, manipulative, or disrespectful, it's a signal that your boundaries are needed. Women frequently tolerate behavior that makes them uncomfortable because they fear confrontation or rejection. Yet tolerating it only reinforces the pattern and diminishes their sense of worth. Boundaries are a way of defining what is acceptable and what is not, and they protect your energy and your heart. When enforced consistently, boundaries teach men how to treat you properly. Without them, confusion and disappointment become inevitable. A strong woman knows that leaving a situation that disrespects her is not weakness, it's strength. Boundaries are the foundation of healthy relationships. They ensure you are never treated as an option. Establishing boundaries requires clarity about what you value and what you will not tolerate. A man who texts phrases that undermine your confidence or dismiss your feelings is testing your limits, whether intentionally or unconsciously. Each boundary you set communicates your non-negotiables and asserts your worth. Women often avoid setting boundaries out of fear of conflict, but the absence of limits invites ongoing frustration. Boundaries are not about punishment, they are about self-preservation and clarity in communication. They give you the power to dictate how you allow others to impact your life. When you define these rules for yourself, you eliminate uncertainty and empower your decisions. Recognizing that your emotional space is sacred is a transformative step. Boundaries ensure that interactions are based on respect and mutual understanding. The key to boundaries is consistency. They must be reinforced to have meaning. If you allow disrespectful words or dismissive phrases to slide occasionally, you create exceptions that undermine your authority. A man learns what is acceptable from your responses, and inconsistency teaches him that limits are negotiable. Every time you enforce your boundaries, you reinforce your value and strengthen self-respect. Women often underestimate the subtle power of these moments, but they shape the entire dynamic of the relationship. Boundaries act as a protective shield, preventing emotional harm before it escalates. They are proactive rather than reactive, and they ensure clarity for both parties. When enforced confidently, boundaries encourage men to step up or step away. Respect begins with the rules you set for yourself. Boundaries also create a framework for healthy communication and emotional honesty. A man who continuously texts hurtful or manipulative phrases is showing that he cannot meet these standards. By refusing to accept behavior that crosses your lines, you create an environment where respect is non-negotiable. Women often confuse love with tolerance, Thinking patience will encourage improvement, yet patience without boundaries often leads to compromise of self-worth. Clear limits protect you from emotional exploitation and clarify your expectations. When a man encounters a well-established boundary, he must either respect it or reveal his true priorities. Boundaries remove ambiguity and force honesty in relationships. They also signal that your heart and mind are worthy of consideration. Your standards become a roadmap for how others engage with you. Enforcing boundaries can feel uncomfortable initially, but it is an act of empowerment rather than rejection. Walking away from someone who texts phrases that demean or manipulate you is not cruelty, it's an assertion of self-respect. Boundaries give you the freedom to maintain emotional health without compromising your values. They teach others how to treat you, and they ensure that your energy is reserved for those who deserve it. Women often internalize guilt when they enforce limits, fearing they are being too demanding. In reality, boundaries honor your needs and protect your well-being. Each firm decision reinforces your self-worth and strengthens your confidence. Emotional clarity comes from recognizing that limits are necessary, not optional. Boundaries separate love from tolerance and respect from compromise. They are the essential framework of empowered relationships. Your worth is not conditional on someone else's words or behavior. Too often, women measure their value based on how a man treats them, assuming that approval or attention defines their importance. But true empowerment comes from recognizing that your value is inherent, not negotiable. No man has the authority to diminish your confidence or make you question your significance. When a man sends dismissive, manipulative, or disrespectful messages, it reflects his character, not yours. Accepting such behavior allows someone else to dictate your emotional state, which is a trap. Self-worth is about knowing that you deserve honesty, care, and respect regardless of external validation. Choosing to leave a man who undermines you is a step toward embracing your own standards. Every decision that protects your heart reinforces the truth of your value. Understanding this creates a foundation of confidence and clarity in relationships. Recognizing your worth means refusing to settle for less than you deserve. A man who repeatedly texts phrases that diminish or manipulate is not someone who will honor your emotional needs. Many women fall into the cycle of hoping love will change behavior, but love alone cannot compensate for a lack of respect. Emotional security is non-negotiable, and your time and energy are finite. By leaving situations where your worth is questioned, you reclaim both. Self-respect is about making choices that align with your values and refusing to compromise your integrity. You are responsible for protecting your emotional boundaries, and doing so sets a standard for how others treat you. Accepting mistreatment as temporary teaches the wrong lesson to both you and him. Instead, your actions communicate clearly that disrespect has consequences. True empowerment is rooted in honoring yourself above fear or hope. Leaving a man who communicates poorly is not an act of rejection. It is an affirmation of self-love. Women often feel guilt or doubt when walking away, but guilt is misplaced when your boundaries are crossed. Walking away demonstrates clarity, courage, and self-respect. It tells the world and yourself that your heart is precious and that you will not allow it to be treated as disposable. Emotional freedom comes from refusing to tolerate behavior that erodes confidence. When you make this choice, you are no longer dependent on his validation or his approval. You are creating space for connections that are nurturing, honest, and respectful. Empowerment is found in prioritizing your own emotional health over temporary comfort. Each decision to honor yourself strengthens your resilience and sets a precedent for future relationships. Self-love becomes the compass that guides your actions and decisions. Understanding your worth also requires clarity in communication and emotional honesty. You must recognize the difference between constructive challenges in a relationship and words that harm your confidence. A man who consistently texts phrases that belittle or manipulate is signaling his inability to engage in a healthy, mature connection. Your responsibility is not to fix him, but to protect yourself. By choosing to leave, you are not punishing him. You are safeguarding your emotional integrity. This is how you ensure that your relationships are built on mutual respect, rather than compromise disguised as patience. Emotional intelligence comes from listening to what his words reveal about his priorities. Choosing yourself over the comfort of familiarity is a radical act of self-empowerment. Each decision to honor your worth reinforces your ability to attract the right kind of love. Embracing your value is ultimately about creating a life that reflects self-respect. Every time you refuse to accept dismissive, manipulative, or hurtful messages, you are choosing yourself over uncertainty. The world responds to confidence, and people treat you in accordance with the standards you set. Accepting less teaches others that your boundaries are negotiable, while walking away signals strength and clarity. Women who understand their worth no longer bend their emotional rules to accommodate inconsistency or disrespect. They know that time, energy, and love are precious resources reserved for those who honor them. Leaving a man who does not communicate with care is a proactive step toward cultivating healthy, fulfilling relationships. Recognizing your worth is not selfish, it is necessary. Your confidence, standards, and self-respect become the lens through which you view every relationship. True empowerment arises from understanding that your value is undeniable.